All right. Incense lit, coffee. Twink. I promise I don't always buy coffee like every day of my life. I feel like in every fucking video, I always have like a purchased cup of coffee next to me. Not every day. Most days. That's not even true. Whatever. Whatever. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Things That Go Bump. I'm your host, Zaebian. This is my weekly Goosebumps review podcast. Today, I can already tell you, is going to be a bit different. I am feeling some type of way. Normally, I feel like I am super, bubbly, at least just more like upbeat, silly, goofy. I kind of naturally start to feel silly and goofy when I am actually recording, but generally speaking, today is a pretty gloomy day outside. Like I said, I'm feeling some type of way, and I more so was just I need to record an episode of the podcast, not only because I only have one more episode prepared before I have no more episodes prepared, but also because I just need to talk. I just need to talk. You know what I mean? And I don't want to just talk to myself in my home or in the car anymore. So I'm just going to talk at my phone and hope that people will listen to the podcast and listen to what I have to talk about. So that's what today's episode is going to be. It might not be as upbeat as crazy or unhinged as it normally is. I'm not really feeling that way today too much. But we'll just see what happens. We'll see how this goes. I might not even post this episode. We might have to redo it, but we'll just see how it goes. So episode 6, let's start with some housekeeping. First of all, it has taken me 6 episodes to think of putting a little tape over the annoying blue light on my microphone to help with the illumination of blue light on my person or on the camera screen or on anything in my set, my very professional studio that we're recording in today. And I feel like this was a very temporary solution. It's not perfect, but you know what? It's significantly better than it has been. So whatever. Moving forward with some housekeeping. First of all, let's actually not recall episode 5. If you were a video viewer of episode 5, I apologize for how insane my hair looked that day. I feel like I looked extremely stupid that day. Don't know why I did my hair like that. That's fine. Every day we're growing. If you don't look back at what you were doing yesterday and think, good Lord, I am a cringy, stupid, ugly person, you're not growing. I actually... Let's talk about this for a second. I know for a fact that I'm growing because every now and then, maybe once a year or once every couple of years, I like to take the Myers-Briggs test, the personality test, just to kind of see where my personality falls. And for a couple of years now, I know I've been an INTP, and I recently just took it maybe a week ago, and I am now an INFJ. That's an advocate. I'm an advocate is what the title is. And that's crazy. I'm the rarest personality type. Would you believe it? Your favorite podcast host of your favorite podcast is an INFJ, the rarest personality type. Not to flex or anything, but I am quite literally not like other girls. And that's that on that. I used to be friends with this girl in college who we were talking about Myers-Briggs one day, and she literally freaked out at me multiple times when we talked about it, because apparently your Myers-Briggs result isn't ever supposed to change. It's never supposed to change. That's the whole point. You find out your personality type one time and that's it. As if we are not always evolving as human beings, as individuals in society. We never change. Once you take your Myers-Briggs test, I almost said IMDb. Once you take your IMBD test, there's IMDb. IMDb. What does that stand for? Anyways, once you take your Myers-Briggs test, even if you're 14, 14 specifically, your personality is your personality type for the rest of your life. Noted. All right, girl. Anyways, also, while editing, I have acknowledged the fact, like a speech teacher in high school, I tend to say and like all the time. Sorry about that, but also I will not be improving the way that I speak for my podcast audience. You're here for a reason. It's because you accept me for who I am, and who I am is a person that says and like all the time. And you just kind of need to get over it. All right. glad we've come to an agreement that we're just going to move past that and not overlook that detail about myself. Last on housekeeping. Sorry, scratching my back on camera. I hope that's not like a weird like kink that somebody has, like feet pics, like scratching back on camera. Scratching back on camera is basically just horny on main. You know what I mean? Oh my god. Anyways, lastly, let's just have a ghost update. Not too much to report, of course, now that I started this little saga in the housekeeping lore. Not too much. I did one of the things that I've experienced could just be chalked up to like my eyes playing tricks on me. I know that one night I opened my bedroom door when I was like going to bed and all the lights in my house were off, and I feel like I saw like a shadow kind of rush into my room near my feet. Now I have a dog. I have a couple dogs. All the dogs were in my room at this point, I believe. And I do have cats. One of them is a black cat. So I assumed it was my black cat like rushing into my room when I opened the door. And then I went downstairs and the black cat was actually sleeping like in the kitchen or something. To which I said, "Oh," but again, that could just be my eyes playing tricks on me in the dark, whatever. However, this other thing that I experienced was definitely not that. I tried to debunk it as soon as it happened, and I have no explanation. I was in my kitchen again. A lot of this shit happens in my kitchen. That's like a very center point in my home, so that's like where a lot of weird shit happens. And out of the corner of my eye, I was like on my phone or something, and out of the corner of my eye, I know for a fact I saw a little mist go by. I don't know, I don't know how to describe it. I was like, is there a smudge on my glasses? There was not. I was like, is something steaming behind me? There nothing was, of course. I don't know how to describe that one. So I've seen a mist and I've seen a shadow. And they were both very quick too. It was like 1 to 2 seconds that I saw each of them. And I definitely don't know how to describe the mist. I have like little floaties in my eyes. I don't know if other people do. And it was definitely not that. It was like fog and I've seen that before too in a different, like when I was doing a ghost investigation one time. But that was weird. That was some weird shit. Anyways, that's my ghost update. Now let's get into the meat of the episode, why we're all here today. Let's talk about a Goosebumps book. So last week we reviewed the very first Goosebumps book, Welcome to Dead House, and today we're not time jumping very far at all. In fact, in my series, the next book in my collection is actually book number 2 in the Goosebumps series. That is going to be Stay Out of the Basement. Now, I feel like I have read this before. I don't recall reading this before. I don't know if I like saw an episode of it. Is there even an episode of it? Hold on. Also, I realize that I don't need to type with one hand because I forget that I have a MacBook that literally has a little tap thing for Siri. So hold on right now. Are you fucking kidding me, Siri? Is there an episode of Stay Out of the Basement in the Goosebumps series?
The Retro Fear set, September 1st, 2020, includes Stay Out of the Basement, Piano Lessons Can Be Murder, Werewolf of Fever Swamp.
What the fuck is the Retro Fear set? That's not what I asked at all. What is this? I don't know. Did you guys see that there's a new Goosebumps series coming out with fucking what's his name? I hate him so much. The Justin Long. He plays the lead in Jeepers Creepers, one of the stupidest horror movies I've ever seen. He is so fucking annoying. He also is in Barbarian, and I believe he's in Tusk. Never seen Tusk, but I've seen the ending of that movie. It looks stupid as fuck as well. And his character in Barbarian, hey, guess what? Horrible. He plays a douchebag so well that I like hate him in real life as well. He's so annoying. Let me try that again. Hey Siri. Am I dumb? It's gonna look up.
Couldn't say.
If you couldn't hear her, she basically heard me say, am I dumb? And her response was, I couldn't say. So that's pretty cool. Hey Siri. How the fuck does this work? I always accidentally tap this and it never works. I don't even remember what I was talking about. Oh. Stay Out of the Basement Goosebumps Classic Series.
I couldn't find that in your Apple Music library.
Is there not an
You can
episode
ask
of
it
it?
to play a radio station, or ask
Oh,
it to
shut the
listen
fuck
to
up,
an app.
Siri. Hold on, people. 1 second. Stay out of the base. I swear to God there was a TV episode of this. Swear to God. Yeah, there is. It's a two-parter. Yeah. What's happening? I know for a fact there was. Yeah. I think I watched it. I think I watched this as a kid. That took fucking forever for me to decide. But I think I did watch this when I was like, Blake McGrath is in it? The guy from Dance Moms? What? What? He is in Goosebumps? What? No fucking way. The internet is a beautiful place. The internet is a beautiful fucking place. Blake McGrath from Dance Moms. He's not from Dance Moms. He's from other shit. I don't know. He's in the Goosebumps episode of Stay Out of the Basement. Oh, that's what it is. Okay, guys. Now, we all know that I'm looking for the classic publications of these books. I swore to God. Okay, this is the copy that I have with the tree guy on it. Hey, that's not real. That doesn't happen. But I was like, I don't feel like this is the original cover. This is one of the original, publications. But I don't feel like it's the original cover. And it's not. The original cover has the creepy green plant hand coming out of the basement door. That's much scarier. Hey, this isn't real. This doesn't happen. I wish I had this copy. I might have to buy it if I ever find it. But anyways, is this the... Now I'm just running down a rabbit hole of images from the show. I need to find a picture of Blake McGrath in this. Oh, this is wrong. In the episode, Margaret is older than Casey. That's wrong, I think. I'm pretty sure that's wrong. Okay, weird Goosebumps lore. Blake McGrath was in Goosebumps. Also, I know that Ryan Gosling was in a Goosebumps episode too. Pretty sure it was Say Cheese and Die. I don't know if I have that book yet. I don't. Good Lord, my ADHD is all over the place today. I'm so sorry. I'm making this your problem. I might edit some of this out. Anyways, let's get back to my outline. I feel like I've read this before or seen it before, whatever. But it was still very good. It was very different from the predecessor, book number 1 in the series. That was very much like a pretty classic, but also kind of fucked up ghost story. This one was just, damn, R.L. Stine was swinging big when he first wrote this story. This is where it gets into me just needing to talk about shit. There is genuinely so much shit in this book that I was like, it took me when I read these books, I read them and then also add to my outline, write the outline at the same time that I'm reading them. So I am recording my live thoughts while reading the book so that I can talk about them on the podcast. And it took me 2 or 3 hours to get through this book. This is, mind you, 122 pages, and it took me 3 hours because of how much I kept writing in my outline and shit. And it was insane. So I feel like I almost need to deviate from how I do my normal reviews, where I like kind of go plot point by plot point, like through the whole book and talk about them. Because I just have so much shit that I want to talk about, because some of this shit was crazy. And just like the commentary is so good. Oh my God, let's get into it. So let's start with a synopsis. I'm going to run you very briefly through like the whole book. So our main characters are Margaret. That's like, it's not first person, but Margaret's the primary character, and her 11-year-old brother, Casey. I feel like Margaret is younger than Casey, but I could be wrong. I don't know. If you look up the episode, Margaret's older than Casey. That could be the truth. I don't know. It never says Margaret's age. My incense isn't burning. My incense has fucking dudded out on me. How irritating. If this happens the whole episode, I'm going to be so pissed. I feel like this happened recently as well. Sorry to sidetrack us in the middle. I don't know. I don't know what's going on, you guys. Maybe I shouldn't have done this today. I don't know. I'm also keeping an eye on the time. I got to go to therapy soon. Whatever. Okay. We have Margaret and Casey. They live with their parents. Their mother is a mother. Their mother is mother. Diane is mother. And their dad, I think his name is Michael, but he's a scientist. He's a botanist. And pretty early in the book, we learn that he was fired from his most recent job, and now he spends all of his time working on something mysterious in his basement. And his kids are not allowed in the basement. And for a majority of the book, their mom is away. She is like absent because she is flying out of, they live in California, and she's flying to Tucson. Where's that? I think that's Arizona. If I'm right, I'm going to freak out. Tucson. Oh my God, it is. It's in Arizona. I am probably the smartest person you guys have ever fucking encountered, just in case you were wondering. Anyway, so she goes to Arizona to take care of her sister who's in the hospital. Like, it's a very, like, intense, like, oh my God, your Aunt Eleanor needs surgery, so I have to go be with her while she's in fucking hospice or something. Anyway, so the mom's gone. It's a whole story about basically the kids getting into the basement, finding out that their dad is, like, creating these weird fucking plants in the basement, but he like really doesn't want them to be down there. He discovers them down there and like really secures them not being able to get in there while he's working. And then they start observing that he is behaving really, really weirdly. He just kind of is not really acting like himself and doing a bunch of weird fucking shit. And but by the I'll go through the weird fucking shit in a minute. By the like, and it's like weird, scary, out of character. He's almost like turning into a monster or something. And then by the end of the book, it ends up being this whole thing of like their dad that they've been living with, who's really scary now, is actually a plant copy of their dad, and their real dad is trapped in like a supply closet in the workspace in the basement, and they rescue him and they get rid of the plant dad, and then everything's okay. There's so much more to like elaborate on, but that's like a brief synopsis of the whole book, just so you know what happens. But good Lord, let's kind of just dive into some of the fucked up shit in this book. So, as I mentioned, I've mentioned this many times beforehand, so I'm like, good Lord, this is like a very like heavy theme in the Goosebumps series. The recurring like leading impact of poor family dynamics, specifically with fathers, but just the disconnect of like children to their parents in this book. And I feel like in this book in particular, but also in the entire series. And like this book really, really heavily kind of drives that home. In the first book, there really wasn't too much of a disconnect between the parents and the children, but the children were still very much doing their own thing. In this one, the kids are like very aware of the issues with their relationship with their father specifically. But we established in the beginning that they have moved from Michigan, where their dad used to work, to California because he was fired from his last job. For most of the book, we don't really know why. Eventually, we obviously learn what kind of happened. There's some kind of relating to the family dynamics. There's some weird situation established in the very beginning of the book that Margaret, the kind of main character, is always jokingly called Fatso as like a nickname, but it's because of how skinny she is, just like her dad. That is so fucked up. That is so fucked up. That's just so fucking crazy. And it's like feeding into this disconnect from her dad, who she feels like she has a good relationship with, because she's being shamed for a very vague similarity that she has to her father. And then that's even like made more sad by the fact that throughout the entirety of this book, the father is like, it becomes her own villain of the story. It's insane. It's crazy. Like that horrible, it's like her brother calling her fatso because she's really skinny. It's so fucked up. That is so fucked up. But also one of the leading reasons that he is the father is disconnected from their family, like I kind of said earlier, is he isolates himself in the basement, intensely isolates himself in the basement, does not let anyone go down there. And he's just completely wrapped up in what he is doing, which we don't really know what he's doing or why he's doing it for a lot of the book. Obviously, that's the mystery, is like, what the fuck is going on down there and why are we doing this? And like, this is obviously, his own isolation is very obviously taking an extremely heavy toll on Margaret and Casey, but as well as his wife. And it is so sad. There's literally one point when the mom is just about to like leave to go like be with her sister. She calls to him from the basement and is like, hey, you have to take me to the airport, it's time to go. And then before he comes upstairs, she like looks at Casey and Margaret and she's like, do you think he'll even notice when I'm gone? And it talks about how she said it with like a joking manner, but Margaret could like see sadness in her eyes. It's like, oh my fucking God. It's not only like affecting his wife, but then she's aware that her kids are aware of it as well, to the point that she like jokes about it with them, jokes in quotation marks. It's so sad. It is genuinely so sad. He's so wrapped up in his own fucking thing in their house that his whole family feels like he's just like a stranger almost. It's crazy. And you have like this weird dynamic of like two parents who are distant from the children, for like the kids are left alone for most of this book, but it's for two completely different purposes. One is completely selfish. The dad just locked in the basement, completely consumed by his work and his career. And then you have the mom who is like completely selfless and proves for the entire book that she is family oriented. She's always defending her husband to her kids up until that point when she pretty much is leaving. The reason she's distant and absent for most of the book is because she is supporting a family member who's going through a hard time. And like a couple different times during the book, she's on the phone with Margaret while Margaret's saying like, this is kind of weird, like shit's kind of going on, we miss you. And she's like, it's okay. Like, she's never like dismissive of her children. She's just so family oriented and like also caring for a family member at the same time and trying to like juggle that, but that makes her distant as well. So it's like, good Lord, this family cannot catch a break. And at the center of it is the selfishness that their father is being consumed by. This is like, of all the books I've read so far, this is definitely the most centered around like problems within a family, but also like I don't know, that whole family dynamic is just the leading cause of what's wrong in this book, what the problem in this book is. So now let's talk more about the weird kind of behaviors that we observe Dr. Brewster partaking in throughout like the mom's absence, while it's just Margaret and Casey alone, and he's being very distant from them. So obviously he never leaves the basement, and when he does, he is very short with others who try to talk to him just so he can go back to his work. He's like a fucking iPad kid, like just very dismissive and very like short so he can go back to doing what he wants to do. And like we just said, that ruins their family. Basically, that is ruining any relationship that they all have with one another. Twink. Okay. After there's one scene, I think it's when he's driving the mom to the airport, Margaret and Casey finally are like, we're going to go down to the basement. We're going to see what the fuck is going on. Oh, we'll get into that more later. But yeah, they go in the basement. They realize what's going on. Oh, sorry. I was thinking about what I have to say about that later, and it makes me so uncomfortable. But after he discovers them down there, he like very calmly is like, I'm so disappointed in you. And then he puts a lock on the basement door so that he can lock himself in away from his children even more when he's in the basement, which is just so weird. Then it starts to get into the more like supernatural shit. This is almost like a weird This is a weird sci-fi book. At one point, Margaret goes downstairs in the middle of the night and sees that her dad is like shoveling food into his mouth at the kitchen sink. And she's like, what the fuck is he doing? And then she's like, I don't want him to think I'm spying on him, so I'm going to chill out back here. And she finds that he is eating plant food, like fucking fertilizer out of a bag. Weird shit. And then after that, we see that he starts wearing a baseball hat, and instead of hair, he has leaves on his head, like is growing leaves out of his fucking head. All his hair's fallen out. He's growing leaves, and it weirdly a couple of times talks about how Margaret gets weirded out by thinking about leaves growing out of your head and crawling around on your scalp. And this book was so weirdly descriptive about shit it didn't need to be descriptive about. It was so gross. Then it just intensifies. In the very beginning of the book, the first time that Margaret and Casey try to see that what their dad is doing in the basement, we see that he has like really badly cut his hand, and his hand is like bandaged for the whole book. And she, in the middle of the night again, a different night, sees him going or hears him go into the bathroom, and she is like, I need to figure out what the fuck is going on. So she gets out of bed. And she like kind of tiptoes to the bathroom and is like peering in to see what he's doing. He's standing at the sink, like mending his wound, but he's like bleeding from his open wound still, like green ooze, not blood, not human blood, green ooze. And she's like, what the fuck? So she, kind of avoids that situation. Then the next morning after that happens, she goes into his room again and is like, I need to know what's going on. So she like goes into the room. She's like, she sees that he's not actually in bed. He's already down in the basement working. But she sees that where he was sleeping in the bed, the sheets are covered in dirt that is also infested with insects, like bugs crawling around in the dirt on his bed. And that's weird. And then he later, I don't know if it's the same day or whatever, but at one point he like becomes weirdly invested in like what they're doing. He knows basically that they are seeing some weird shit that he's doing. Margaret tells Casey about some of the shit she's seen, and then he tries to have like a fatherly moment with them where he says like that he's trying to basically take DNA from an animal and mix it with a plant. So he's trying to create a plant that is part animal. Okay, weirdo. But then after that, he has another fatherly moment where he like weirdly tries to make them lunch for the first time, and the food is like some weird green slop, basically. Like I think one of the kids says it looks like green mashed potatoes, and the dad is like aggressively like, eat it, just eat it. Eat it, bitch. Just try it. Just even take a single bite of it. Just try it. And it's like, what the fuck are we doing? And then when that happens, they're actually interrupted by this guy named Mr. Martinez, who we find out is dad's is the dad's previous boss from the job he was fired at. And we learn that Mr. Martinez didn't actually want to fire him, but he worked, I believe, at a college, and the college board basically forced Mr. Martinez to get rid of him. But Mr. Martinez is still invested in the work that he's been doing on his own. So he comes over for like a house visit to just see what he's been up to. Then we realize a day or two later, Mr. Martinez never actually left the house, and Casey and Margaret go in the basement, and they find Mr. Martinez's tie and jacket bundled up and shoved under the dad's work table. And then another day, they find out that the dad has, in a different location, shoved Mr. Martinez's pants and shoes under like a storage shelf or something. Weird shit. And that's basically the end of like all the suspenseful shit happening before we find out what's actually going on, which I explained earlier. But before I forget, now that I've explained all that shit, let's move on to my picture of the day. So it was, we'll get into more later, but it's kind of, generally speaking, the villain of this story is the plant dad, basically. So I've just depicted him as best as I could. We have the father, Dr. Brewer. We have Dr. Brewer in a lab coat. He's got some goggles on because scientists wear goggles, I think. He's, bleeding the green ooze from his hand. It kind of just looks like a green ribbon is growing out of his palm, but that's not what's happening, I promise. And he also has leaves growing out of his head, but those are being kind of pressed down by a blue Dodgers cap, which I described earlier. It's very specifically a Dodgers cap, and in my picture you can tell it's a Dodgers cap because I have very, very clearly printed the word Dodgers on it. Is that baseball? I'm done using Siri, actually. That was such a short-lived thing I tried to do, and it just pissed me off. Is Dodgers baseball? Is Dodgers baseball? So stupid. Is Dodgers baseball? Los Angeles Dodgers is a baseball team. I am so smart, you guys. Don't think that I'm not smart. I knew the answer to that question and to the question I asked before, I think, about Tucson. I just was fact-checking, okay? I'm just fact-checking here. I'm not guessing and then seeing if I'm right. I am just basically citing my sources for you. Basically just proving to you that I'm right instead of just talking, blowing smoke out of my ass. You know what I mean? I am so smart. But yeah, and then in this picture, he's saying, get the fuck out to his children. Because that's basically what the first chapter in this book ends with, is them seeing that his hand is profusely bleeding and he's like, stay out of the basement. And it's like, okay, I guess that's where the title of the book comes from. But yeah, that's just some of the weird shit that Dr. Brewer portrays. Those are some of his weird behaviors that he portrays throughout the book while we're trying to discover, like, what the hell is going on here. But we're going to deep dive into some of that later. I also want to mention, before I kind of stray too far from just the general plot, Margaret has this friend who is in a couple of chapters named Diane. Diane is annoying as shit. And she's also just like, there is a bit of symbolism in her character, I believe. She's not just a completely useless character. But she basically just like is a pot stirrer. And she's actually the one, she's over at their house when the dad takes the mom to the airport. And she's the one who basically is just like, let's go in the basement and see what he's doing. Like, she's in someone else's home. Her friends have just told her, we're not allowed to go in the basement. She's like, let's go see. Well, I'm bored. Let's go see what's in the basement. So she's the one that gets them down there. And she just like pushes these kids past their boundaries, basically. That's like her overall goal. Whether it's like mental boundaries or like comfort zones, which isn't really comfort zones, but more so just like obeying rules that their parents have set. She's just a trouble starter. And weirdly, she has red hair. It very descriptively, every time she's in a chapter, says that she has red hair. But yeah, so Diane's a weirdo. She also eventually in the book introduces this idea to Margaret that her father is a mad scientist. And that's where that's kind of the initiation of Margaret starting to kind of like for her father to kind of become like a villain in her mind. And she very like emotionally struggles with this idea of like her dad scaring her. She doesn't like that her dad terrifies her. But then Diane is like, yeah, your dad's pretty much a mad scientist. And she's like, oh my God, is he? Like, I don't think he is, but is he? And Diane also proposes this thing that apparently her father said about Dr. Brewer, saying basically that he was fired from the university because he refused to end his experiments that he was doing. And then later, again, we learned that that's not true because Mr. Martinez, his boss, didn't want to fire him. He was forced by his higher-ups to fire him. But he still had that, Dr. Brewer still had that kind of enabler, his old boss, who was like, I still want to know what the fuck you're doing, so please keep doing it and I will stay in touch. So I don't know. Diane really just like kind of pushes Margaret and Casey uncomfortably, like not in a good way, of like, but kind of in a good way. She almost like leads them to learn kind of the truth about their father, but in a way that makes them uncomfortable. Maybe that's honestly a good thing though. I don't know. It's a little conflicting. She's a very important character. She's very annoying, but she's a very important character, whether it's for a good or bad reason. Otherwise, Margaret and Casey would probably just keep obeying their dad's rules and never really learn what's going on until it's too late. But who's to say? Okay, before I get into like the big kahuna that makes me really uncomfortable, let's talk about one piece of commentary that I drew basically as soon as I started reading this book. Just this general idea of like, I feel like everyone, especially in America, falls victim to this, of just like letting your career completely corrupt your entire life. You know what I mean about that? Let's just kind of unpack that. This theme in this book, I don't really think I need to explain it, but like this entire theme is explained and just shown in this book by everything I have talked about regarding Dr. Brewer's behaviors, of just isolating himself in what he's doing, basically ruining any connection he has with his family, and just focusing on himself and his work. I have worked some really, just for me, really shitty jobs before. And I don't understand. Like, I did an internship in basically an office space at one point when I was in college. And it's a job like that really kind of got me thinking and kind of set me on the mindset that I'm in now of just like, how do people do this? How do people work a job like this for like 30 years and then retire and call themselves happy? It was such a miserable environment for me personally, and I would assume for other people who are just not saying so. And I just don't get it. I never understood, and I still now do not understand how that is a healthy lifestyle for people. I don't get it. And it just kind of goes back to, I've been on this whole journey since I dropped out of college. I actually realized today that tomorrow marks 1 year since I dropped out of college. And one of my leading reasons for doing that, even though it was a very scary decision because I was basically going completely against the status quo of like all of society and the American dream, I've just realized like that shit is not for me. Getting a degree and finding a job that applies to this degree I got when I was in my 20s is supposed to make me happy for the rest of my life and make me money so that I can survive barely in this economy. And then I retire with no money, and then I'm supposed to be happy even though I'm not really allowed to work anything other than a shitty part-time job. It just is crazy to me. That idea is so crazy to me. I do not ever want to subscribe to that kind of lifestyle. I'm not even trying to like preach the gospel or say like, please believe the same thing as me. I understand that it was a very hard thing for me to even like get a mental grasp on and to accept like, this is my truth, basically. This is how I think and this is what I believe. And I know that's not for everybody. But I just don't get it. I don't get where people actually find fulfillment in doing something like that. And like going back to, I've always been someone who is under the impression of just the idea that the American dream in general is not attainable. I'm like, yeah, I read The Great Gatsby. I know that this isn't real. But it's like I never realized until the past year or two how unattainable the American dream is personally for me. And I feel like it's kind of like how people are saying we need to rewrite the Constitution because society has changed so much. The world that we live in has changed so much since those rules were established that they need to change with the times in order for us to continue living peacefully in this horrible society that we have let evolve into what it is today. I also feel that just something about the outlook of how we view this country and what our purpose here is needs to change, because this idea of getting an education, getting a second education, or like a higher education past high school, subscribing yourself to 30 plus years at one career for your entire life, and then living happily ever after as a fucking old person with no money, that is so, it's unattainable, but it's just fucking terrible too. Who wants to do that? Who wouldn't, when you're young and capable of exploring just your options, exploring the world, exploring everything? Who wouldn't want to take advantage of that? But no, we're expected to dedicate ourselves and slave away in fucking school for no reason. You basically don't stop being a student until some people, your fucking 30s. It just makes no sense to me. And then you're also expected to raise a family and shit like that in order for society to view you as like doing something right. Who the fuck is doing anything right? No one, actually. No one is doing anything right, because there's no way, there's no standard that's realistic to live up to in this fucking society. But people don't want to admit that because people are so fucking scared of change. It is just infuriating. Like it, and for me personally, it's like, I know that what y'all are doing is absolutely not for me. And I am fine with that. I am fine figuring out what is for me, and I am privileged enough to like actually reasonably be in a position in my life where I can do that. Some people are not in a point in their life where they can do that. I recognize that. I feel really bad for those people because I can't even imagine the things that they're having to do to just survive, let alone be able to like comfortably find themselves in a space where they can be mentally at a place like I'm at, where it's like I have the option to think about what makes me happy without stressing about basically surviving in this economy. I have a cushion. I'm okay. But like other people are not. I get that. It's just, I wish that society made our lives easier. It's kind of like what I was talking about in like episode 4, where it's just like, God, the people who are in charge of us make our fucking lives so difficult to the point that they are barely worth living. Because what the fuck are we supposed to do when we can barely afford a home, afford a roof over our heads, afford the fucking rights to our own bodily autonomy, and afford the right to keep ourselves healthy with fucking health insurance and shit like that? Instead, they're making all these stupid fucking rules we have to follow. They're making them stupid expensive so that they can make money. It's this country, America, today is a joke. This country is a fucking joke. All of the systems that are still in place that were established way back when with our founding fathers, it's such a fucking crock of shit. And it needs to change because we can't keep surviving like this. It's horrible. Like, the American dream is so genuinely unattainable for most people. And it's so horrible that we all feel the need to still subscribe to this idea. Because we can't. But then when you don't, and when you accept that you can't and don't want to, I'm personally made to feel like a fucking outcast. In like addition to just the fact that I'm horrible about comparing myself to other people, which I feel like I've talked about before, I feel like a fucking loser most of the time when I look at my peers and just other people my age generally who are doing the things that they're expected to do. It still makes me feel stupid. I know that I'm doing something that's fulfilling to me. I'm happy with my life right now, generally speaking. Society is still making my life extremely difficult because I'm not following the status quo, but whatever. I'm pretty much coming to like an ending phase of most of my big struggles right now. And I'm at a point where, like I said before, I have a cushion. I can start thinking about what I want to do that will make me happy and make my life worth living for me and no one else. It's a very selfish thing. You have to prioritize yourself, but like, I like, you still feel like you're made to be a failure if you don't subscribe to this unattainable lifestyle that most people cannot afford mentally, emotionally, financially, physically. Like, you can't do it. I don't know how people are still like brainwashing themselves almost into thinking that it's a realistic thing to do. I don't get it. I do not understand it. So like, props to you for still doing it. I don't like judge people for it. I'm just like, good Lord, I'm tired and I'm not even doing what you're doing. How the fuck are you not just so exhausted? How are you not so tired? And when do we realize we don't have to be that tired? We can do other things and be happy and successful, whatever the fuck that means. Whatever. You know what I'm... And this book pretty much highlights that idea of like, look at what you do to yourself when you subscribe to things like this so fucking intensely, like society expects you to do. Dedicate yourself to your work. You ruin connections that you have with your own family, with your own children, with your partners, like with everyone, because you dedicate yourself to your work in the most unhealthy way. I think that is such a shame. And also, it like, the American dream also makes us feel like, I kind of had this realization recently because I had someone ask me, I was talking about how I dropped out of school and how I'm just kind of doing my own thing. I don't really know what I want to do. And someone asked me like, okay, well, what's your passion? And I had no answer for that person, because in this society, in the American dream mindset that is pretty much instilled in all of us, our passion is equivalent with our career. I think that is a bunch of fucking horse shit. I don't have a passion to work a job for 30 years. I have a passion to like live a fulfilled life. I racked my brain around that for weeks after I had this conversation with somebody. And my passion in life is to be happy and to try to make other people happy in that process, however I can. And to just live a full life, however I can. And I also talked about this in therapy recently. And my therapist brought up a really good point of like, my job is not my passion. I love my job. You're so lucky to find a job that you actually really like, but I don't think that your job is your passion. I think your job is like a tool that you can use and utilize to actually reach your goals and reach your passion. And for me, that does not apply to a promotion, to being a person in power. I don't want that shit. I don't want that responsibility. For me, a job should be something that I don't hate going to. I don't feel like I have to go to it knowing that it will make me fucking miserable for $1. I want my job to be something I enjoy. I want my job to be something that also pays me well, because I need money. We all need money to survive in this society, which is just so fucking unfortunate, that the only thing people care about anymore is finances. And in doing so, we lose our connections with one another and with humanity and what we're all doing here. except trying to survive under a bunch of fucking people who suck and who hate us and who do not care if we fail or succeed. But yeah, I don't believe that your job is your passion. I don't think anyone is actually that passionate about doing work. Because at the same time, everyone's like, oh, you're not meant to like your job. You're supposed to hate working. So how do you then say that your job is your passion? I think it's a bit hypocritical. I think the entire American dream is so hypocritical. And I think that this weird children's book really highlights that in its fucking antagonist. And it just like the whole idea at the very end, I didn't really talk about this in detail, where like Margaret and Casey discover their real dad like tied up in the back of a supply closet, like moaning and waiting for someone to help him because his own creation has like his own work has gone too far and created something more powerful than him, to the point that it has trapped him literally from ever making an improvement until the other people in his life come in and interfere and help him. It's almost like an addiction. Like they help him. He then has the opportunity to destroy what he's created. And in the book he does. He takes an axe and like there's a whole thing where he takes an axe and then fucking Margaret starts to second guess which one is her dad, because they're both like, I'm your dad. And I've kind of forgot to talk about that plot twist. They start to, it's basically like the Spider-Man meme where they're like pointing at each other and they're like, I'm your dad, I'm your dad. It's a very Beware the Snowman ending where she's like getting tricked. And then Margaret like takes this axe from her dad and is like holding it and like trying to figure out who's who, and then has this moment where she's like, Casey, go grab me a knife off the wall. And he does, and she like slashes at one of the dads, and she slashes at the dad who is trapped in the closet, and he starts bleeding actual blood, and he like calls her a nickname that he used to call her, and she's like, this is my real dad. And she hands the axe back to him, and then the dad chops the fake like plant dad in half, and he falls apart, and that's the end of the book. And then the dad like destroys all the plants, and they like pretty much live happily ever after or whatever. There's a stupid like suspenseful in quotes plot twist where it's like she's watching this bonfire in their backyard of all of his plants that he's destroyed, but there's one little flower that like crawls to her feet and is like, Case or Margaret, I'm your real dad, help me. Stupid fucking ending. But just generally speaking, that's the plot twist of the book. I forgot to talk about that completely. But generally speaking, like someone else gives him the opportunity after he realizes what he's done wrong to destroy what he has created and start over and revive all of these things that are good for him in his life, his connections with people, a healthy work life, family, whatever relationship with each other. What's that called? Like your work to, what's it called? I can't remember. My brain is starting to shut off. This is really irritating me. So I'm talking too much, but whatever. So yeah, basically this book highlights that the American dream is a bunch of fucking bullshit. Now let's move on to the basement is the epicenter of everything in this book. That is just fucking insane. This is where all the experiments go on. This is where the creation of this other plant dad happens. This is where science is taken to an entirely new level. Like, this is the epicenter of the craziness in this book. And I think that the basement is like, overall, it's really just a symbol of forbidden knowledge. And it's also weirdly, because of like weird little details that happen in it, my English literature brain picked up on them. I don't think if I had previous experience analyzing text for details like this, I would have picked up on anything like this. But I also think it's like a weird, I don't like that it was incorporated in a kid's book, but I think it is a weird representation of just like temptation as well. Let's get into it. So like in the book, it's very clearly described temperature wise as like a hot and exotic jungle almost, because all these plants need to be kept at a weirdly hot, humid temperature. And it's also this kind of like place of just generally speaking, like breaking a rule and disobeying a rule. And because it talks about how like Casey and Margaret separately each feel like actual fear, as if they're doing something wrong, as if they're doing something that they shouldn't be when they are in the basement. They have this like third eye sense almost of like their guts telling them like, you're not supposed to be here. Like, what are you doing? You are in danger right now. And that kind of, like I talked about earlier, is almost is like promoted by their friend Diane, which is why initially I feel like she is like a bad influence on them. She's putting them in this position of like feeling like genuine fear and like danger of their safety. But maybe that's a good thing, because then they take the initiative that they need to kind of end that and to figure out what's going on and to solve their problems and things. But I kind of called that back to the whole like weird religious affiliation that I saw in Welcome to Dead House with like Ray Thurston and like tempting fucking what's her name to, what was her name? I don't know. Kind of talking, like trying to like rope her into like being a ghost child with them in this town. And then she was rescued by the light and stuff like that. So like in that sense, he's like the sin that the main character in that book, is drawn to. And in this one, it's almost like the Garden of Eden, literally a garden of plants that they are not supposed to be around. And like, they are being tempted to like touch, literally they're being tempted to touch. Diane and Casey are like, oh my God, Margaret, feel this plant. It has a really weird like texture. It doesn't feel like a leaf or anything. But like Diane is almost like the snake in the Garden of Eden that's like tempting them. Like, come here. You're not supposed to, but like, I'm telling you, come here. And I don't like, I think what the snake is supposed to be Satan in the Bible. I don't know. Horror, generally speaking, always has a weird religious affiliation with it, or like a weird religious undertone, something that kind of calls back to the Bible and shit, because it's almost like challenging religion. I've noticed that as a major horror fan for my whole life, but this is where it gets so weird, people. This is where my brain, I was like, I wish that I would have been oblivious to this stupid detail that like, there's, mind you, this is about 11-year-old children. I did not like this. But when they are down there in like the hot basement and like Diane is telling them to touch all these plants and shit, at one point Casey takes his shirt off. It grosses me out. Like, I get that it's hot, but like, this was a weird fucking detail to include. And this is one of the major things that leads me to thinking like, is this supposed to be some like weird like layer of temptation and like almost like something weird like sexually? And I was like, this is a children's book. This is a book about children. Why would we include a detail in there like this? It is so fucking strange. And Diane even like makes a comment about his body, and then it is like moved on immediately. It is so weird. It is so weird. Mind you, this is a book from the 90s, like 30 years ago. I know that was a different time, whatever. But still, how did no one read that back then and think that's a problem? What editor read this book and didn't think to tell R.L. Stine, that's weird as fuck. That's inappropriate. Anyways, yeah, Casey takes his shirt off, and that's so weird. And there's like this feeling almost when they're in there that something like wants them. It's not only like a fear of danger, but then there's an overarching like voice in their head. I don't remember which one exactly, but one of them is like, I feel like something wants me here, like wants to take me. And there's a part where they leave, and the dad, because I think they like hear that the dad is coming home from dropping the mom off at the airport, and they go back upstairs, and Casey's like, what happens? Diane leaves, and Casey is like, oh fuck, I left my t-shirt in the basement on the ground. So this weird thing of him like taking his shirt off, and then it becomes like evidence that he has become like a victim to this weird like tempting, almost like lustful environment that's going to get him in trouble because he basically partook in something that he wasn't supposed to. It is so bizarre, people. It was so weird and gross, and I did not like it at all. It was so weird. But like I immediately knew he was going to do that. As soon as they like left the basement hurriedly, I was like, he left his shirt down there and they're going to get in huge fucking trouble now. It was so weird. But yeah, it ends up being like this this like symbol of just like carelessness and like this like weird, like engaging, like let loose. I hated it so much, and it ends up getting them caught by their father because they both run downstairs to get it, and then when they come back up, he's standing at the basement door. That is what provokes him to then add a lock to the door so that they like to further stop them from going down there, and so he can trap himself down there all the time, alone, in isolation. It is so weird. When you add that element to it, it is so fucking strange. And we don't get to see that element to it until we witness the like third person perspectives of the children at the center of this book experiencing it for themselves. It is so fucking strange. And then there's also like the ominous like banging from the supply closet, and like I said before, we learned that is coming from like the plants actually like are weird too. The plants in the basement, they like move and they moan. They like physically moan and things like that. And they are like human like, and it's so strange. But yeah, in the supply closet, it's her dad tied up and like these other plants making a bunch of noises and shit. But they have like human body parts, like feet and arms and shit. They're growing tomatoes and things like that have like human faces on them. It is just like almost this just representation. Like that is almost similar to like the forbidden fruit. It's even like locked away with like a piece of plywood nailed over the door, so like they cannot get it. That is like the forbidden shit. And when they get in there is when they find like their dad all tied up at the end of the book. It's so fucking weird. I feel like there has to be some weird tie to like the idea of the Garden of Eden, and just I hate it. So like on one hand, it's a symbol of this weird temptation, like lustful thing, but on the other hand, it's also just this idea of like forbidden knowledge. You are not supposed to be down here. Things are really fucked up down here. Things have gotten out of hand down here. And it's like, oh, it's this weird, is dichotomy the right word? I don't know what that word means. Yes. Not it's entirely different. They're not really different. They are different, but they like go together. I don't know. There's some fucking term for it. But yeah, that's like my like kind of just review over the basement in this book. It is so strange. And lastly, I just want to chat about like, I obviously, like I've said, the general like antagonist of the book, to kind of move away from the idea of the basement is more so where it all happens. It's kind of like Dead House. Dead House is where the shit happens, and the basement is where the shit happens. But the real like, okay, the like black and white antagonist of the book is this imposter plant dad, but we don't actually know he's the like antagonist. We don't know he's an imposter until the very end. But I also think that just overlying all of this shit, it goes back to a conversation I've had many times before in class and just with friends and things like that. I like the real villain of the story is just science, which is horrifying, and like this pursuit of knowledge and this pursuit of forbidden knowledge. And because like his main objective, as far as what the imposter tells his kids, is making a plant that is part animal and things like that, and like just mixing the good DNA in plants to make like a super plant and things like that. And his main objective is really just testing the limits, not even testing them so that he can stay away from them though, but so he can move past them. And that is almost similar to like, it's a Frankenstein effect. If anyone has read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, one of my favorite books of all time, I have a snail named after her. My snail is named Mary Shelley. Like it's just this general idea of like, how far is too far? When it comes to pursuing knowledge and making advancements, how far is too far? I think the most relatable thing that we could think of in terms of that today, as far as like how is that a posing threat in society today, is almost like the idea of robots taking over. Like, when do we stop advancing things for our own well-being and safety? But then also, who decides these limits? And who tells us that this is how things should be and this is where we should stop wanting to go further without infringing on someone else's free will? I read Frankenstein and had these discussions with people at a private religious college. This conversation was always like, not always, but most of the time it was very heavily influenced by like God. And like a lot of people's argument would be like, well, that's not what God intended. If he wanted us to, he would show us, things like that. But it's like, for me, it's really just like a scientific, like humanity, spiritual thing of just like, what is too far? We have to decide our own limits, but who gets to decide them? The fucking Republicans that are in charge of us? The fucking like Supreme Court? You're telling me that Brett Kavanaugh gets to tell me when too much is too much? He's biased. Everyone is biased. That's the problem. Who tells us what's too far? When do we decide who we listen to as far as just respecting boundaries and things like that? And that's pretty much the entire premise of Frankenstein, is going too far and facing the consequences of your actions and how they affect other people. And normally it is to drastic measures in order to prove a fucking point that bad things will fucking happen if we go too far. But it's a sticky subject, or it's a like sticky situation, because who tells us when things go too far, and who do we all listen to? No one. That person doesn't exist. That figure does not exist. I don't think there's ever going to be a clear-cut answer to this is what we should listen to when it comes to how far we should advance in society. It's horrifying. It's a horrifying philosophical question that I love to think about. I love to think about it. And I love to get in debates with people about it. But that's the fact. Think about it factually. That is the fucking truth. There is nothing we can do. It's horrifying, but there's nothing we can do. We are all literally fucking powerless to our own power. That pretty much ends my review and discussion of just all these different weird themes and symbols in the second Goosebumps book, Stay Out of the Basement. It's now time to move on to everyone's favorite, section of the podcast. The numbers. Twink. Okay. Good Lord, I've been talking for a long time. Okay, so as always, we start with the spookiness of the concept of the book. I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5. Being left alone in a house with a distant parent who starts to show some extremely disturbing behavior patterns, like we discussed, and finding out that they're actually an evil plant copy of your parent. They're not even your parent to begin with. It's a little corny, I will say. A little corny. The fact that he's like eating plant food and shit. But that's fucking horrifying. Horrifying. Walking into, like, trying to confide in your dad about his weird behavior and seeing his hand gushing green ooze, or finding a bed full of dirt with bugs in it. Horrifying. So scary. But yeah, a little corny. So 4.5 out of 5. The villain in the story that we just discussed, I give a 5 out of 5. The imposter dad, like, besides that, that villain alone is not a 5 out of 5 villain for me. But when you add the element of the real villain in the story being the pursuit of forbidden knowledge, that's always the most, in my opinion, that's probably one of the most horrifying opponents anyone can ever face. And especially when you put that on top of the, like, storybook plant copy of dad antagonist, Horrifying combination. Horrifying. So that is like a perfect formulation of a villain. The overarching, like, higher, or just like the superior conflict, the superior antagonist in this book is not even a character. It's a philosophical theory and just a philosophical idea that you have to think about. That is and it's not like blanket stated. It's never discussed amongst the characters in the book. You have to think about it as a reader. That is the best kind of villain you can develop in a book. 5 out of 5. Absolutely. Moving on to the reader's tolerance of the protagonists. I kind of more so focused on Margaret in this. It's very heavily like Margaret and Casey, but it's more so from Margaret's point of view. She's experiencing a lot of this shit on her own and then telling Casey her main perspective and like the things that she's seeing and shit like that. So I gave Margaret a 4.75 out of 5. Margaret is an absolute badass who figures shit out on her own, but she does need her brother and like her friend Diane and other people in her life to kind of give her a little nudge and give her a little edge to initiate her in figuring out what's going on and things like that. Like, she needed a little nudge to go in the basement, and she needed just, I don't know, a little push almost from her brother at times to go one step further and figure out why things are happening. But she is perfectly capable of trusting her gut. There are so many times that she listens to her gut and is like experiencing this like turmoil of not having answers to what's happening. She is also capable of saving lives and also wielding an axe. And this is a child. That part was crazy. She's just like holding this axe, like two different men standing in front of her that are both her father. That part was insane. I was like, are we serious? She's actually doing this. This isn't some weird cop out where, oh, it's all a dream. Goosebumps doesn't do that shit. It is so wild. Okay. Yeah, so, but Margaret is a little like, she's not completely like, I'm going to do this. She's not like action oriented, but when she's given a little push, she is, and she'll get shit done. So 4.75 out of 5 for Margaret. Plot twists and resolution, I gave a 2.8 out of 5. I found this ending pretty predictable. At a certain point, like before it even happened, there was one point where I was like, I think I know how this is going to end. And like I said, it's possibly because I like might have read this before or seen this episode before, and just like kind of subconsciously remembered what happened after I like read so much of the plot. But it was still a very like creative approach to a situation like this, where like the plant dad was created by the real dad and then overtook him and trapped him away from society, basically. Like that's a very creative approach. And we don't even get to see, or we don't even get to like know when this like switch happened. It could have happened before the book even fucking started, which is insane. Like, it's not even a clear cut, like dad was normal and then he started acting weird. Dad has just always been weird. So we don't even know when the switcheroo of real dad to plant dad even happened. That's cool as fuck. But the like very, very end, like I talked about, was so stupid with the little flower that was like, oh, I'm your real dad. It's like, no, you're not. Shut the fuck up. You're a flower. It was so dumb. That was so dumb, and I hated it. So, like, even though it was predictable and that stupid fucking ending, I gave it a 2.8 out of 5. That was so disappointing. Underlying messages and social commentary. Obviously, I discussed that heavily in this episode. I gave it a 5 out of 5 as well. There is so much effective, genuine commentary on distant parental figures, being consumed by your career and the American dream, resisting temptation, pursuing forbidden knowledge, and just fucking so much more. Like everything we talked about and more. It could go on and on and on. And I I spent too much of the episode talking about it, so I don't feel like I need to discuss it any further. 5 out of 5. And lastly, did I get goosebumps? Kind of did. There was one point, I think it was the first time when they were in the basement, and it was getting to the weird temptation stuff that I talked about earlier, and I was like, ooh, I don't like that. It was like I got goosebumps for a bad reason, not because I was spooked, but I still got them, so it gets the extra half a point. When we add all these numbers together and find the average score, Stay Out of the Basement has an average score of 4.51 out of 5. That means that this is our first book in Things That Go Bump history to receive an average score above 4, let alone above 4.5 in the official list. That's a huge accomplishment. Congratulations, Stay Out of the Basement. And I think it very greatly deserves it. So now, when we move over to our official ratings of the 62 original Goosebumps books, that means that Stay Out of the Basement very confidently in this series so far takes first place in the official ranking, knocking down Vampire Breath to second place and Welcome to Dead House to third place, and so on and so forth. This one, you guys, was a fucking doozy. I really did not know how this was going to go. It went better than I expected. But that's the end of this review. This is the end of the episode. I need to be done. I have to go to therapy in about an hour. And I am so brain dead now. I don't know how this is going to go. But thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much. I appreciate your support. I appreciate everyone who listens to this. Please, if you were watching the video podcast, leave a like and maybe leave a comment. Let me know what you think about anything I discussed in this episode. Subscribe to my channel so that you see when I upload new videos and new episodes of the podcast. You can, if you are listening to this on any of the audio platforms, please leave me a rating. Also, please, in general, if you like this podcast, share it with your friends. I would love to have more people kind of engage with this, past the point of it just being a pretty silly, like, Goosebumps review podcast. Like, yeah, that's not the most pressing information in the world, but I have a really good time doing it, and I think the people who listen to this also do too. And why not spread the joy? Hey, if you like the episode, if you like the podcast, please support it and share it with your friends. I would really appreciate it. If you want to follow me on any of my personal socials, if you want to support my small art business, wherefore.art.thou by Z, I have a print shop on Etsy and some socials for that as well. You can find any of the links that you'd like in the description of this video. And I think that's it. All right. This was a lot. I had to wear my Jinx Monsoon shirt for this because I needed the good vibes today. But episode 6, we're done. Until next time, keep it loosey and stay goosey. I'll see you next time.